this episode, we are talking with Ryan Kraudel, the VP of Technology at Valencell, which is an inventor and maker of wearable and hearable biometric sensor technology. Their tech can measure key vitals in the body, such as blood pressure, temperature, heart rate, and more. And these can help us do a better job of understanding, preventing, and mitigating major health issues like cardiovascular disease, respiratory issues, and hypertension. Hypertension alone impacts over 1 billion people globally. Listen in as we discuss the future of wearables, the impact it can make on the human race, adoption blockers, what the opportunity looks like as we look into the future, and how we are moving from a low frequency, high acuity system to a high frequency, low acuity system. All this and more. Stay tuned and enjoy. All right, cool. All right, we're here with Ryan Kraudel. Ryan, welcome to the show. Why don't you give us a little overview of your bio?
Sure. Yeah. Great to be here. First of all, good to connect again. Always good to talk to you. I head up marketing for a company called Valencell. We make the biometric sensor technology that goes into wearable devices of all kinds. And so that means we're a relatively small company, and means I get involved in a lot of different things that don't necessarily fall into the traditional definition of marketing. I get into some partner development and investor relations and research partnerships and a variety of different things. Whatever it takes to grow the business essentially is what I'm working on. But as a company, we're kind of sitting in the middle of this convergence that's going on between consumer wearables and health and medical devices, and enabling both of those categories of companies to provide biometric sensor enablement and outputs and all of the useful things you can do with that data in the context of either a consumer or a medical use case.
That's great. And, I'm not actually sleeping. My Zoom video is being wonky, but
Is it frozen on your end? Because it's frozen on my end.
Yeah, like I'm just looking at myself frozen, and
Okay.
but I'm like on my. I mean, I came to work just for this Wi-Fi, like this is supposed to be all good.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I actually just did the speed test, and it's like pretty performant. So it might be a Zoom issue. But
Okay.
just flag it if you can't hear my audio, because obviously, the audio piece is kind of goes to the podcast, and usually we'll do the video, but I'll switch that to speaker view just so, like, at least while you're talking, it's easier to do that. And I can see you fine. You're kind of operating okay. I just don't know what's going on with my deal, but camera display. Okay, cool. So that's great. And Valencell has been getting a lot of press recently for a good showing at CES. Why don't you give us a little bit of an insight into what you guys are working on now and where you see the future of, well, for me, I'm interested in, biometric sensing and the data that can collect both actively and passively. But obviously you guys are way more advanced and you're thinking about the long-term future of that. But tell me what was the big to do at CES and what you
Yeah, so at CES, it was all virtual, of course. So we didn't get to do a lot of the in-person conversations that we normally do. But really, it was a reflection of what's going on in the marketplace in terms of this convergence I mentioned around consumer and health and medical devices. And just to take a quick step back, we at Valencell focus on this sensor technology that goes into wearable devices that measures your heart rate and your heart rate variability and your respiration rate and a variety of different other biometrics. And the latest thing we've done, and this is to your question, Nick, around what was the topic of interest last week, was we can now do blood pressure with this same sensor technology that we put into wearable devices of all kinds. And that is the latest example of what we're working on, but also kind of the broader context of where this sensor technology is going and where these wearable devices are going more broadly is one of the things that we're really focused on is getting more out of this sensor technology than has ever been possible before. So most people think of this sensor technology and wearable devices in general as sort of heart rate monitoring or maybe activity tracking or something along those lines that many of these devices can do in the marketplace today. And that's certainly valuable up to a certain extent, but there's a lot more that those uh, devices and the sensor technology that's embedded in those devices can do. And at a high level, it's really getting deeper insights into how an individual's body is responding to whatever they might be doing, whether that's sitting on a couch or running a marathon or managing a disease of some kind, whatever it might be. The sensor technology can now do much more advanced insights and analytics around that individual's physiological responses to the conditions and the environments that it's in, both acutely in terms of what's going on a second by second basis, but also now that you've got hundreds of millions of these devices, literally hundreds of millions of these devices in the field now, that people wear on a regular basis, if not all day, every day. You start to see some really interesting things in terms of the longitudinal data patterns that emerge that give you insights that have not been seen before in terms of looking at those longer patterns and those individualized baselines, if you will, that get established with measuring someone continuously over time, and then looking at, okay, when are there deviations from that baseline, and what should be done about those deviations, whether that's something of concern that a medical professional should look at, or if it's just something that less benign around, let's say, trending lower on your fitness level because you haven't been exercising enough or something along those lines. So um, at a high level, that's kind of a lot of what we're working on, and kind of where we see this market going and this trend going in terms of providing deeper insights and more longitudinal insights on an individual level that enable people to take more control of their health and fitness, and then also integrate that data and those insights into either their health record in terms of like an electronic health record, or patient workflow, or just a general wellness dashboard, depending on what exactly they're looking at.
Yep. And so you guys really, dive deep on the sensor level. Where is that industry now? Like you said, you just were able to launch, blood pressure as a thing that you can monitor on existing, sensors or
Mhm.
existing products. Is that a big needle? I mean, I guess obviously what we're saying is that's a big needle mover. Has that been a barrier to adoption? Or just kind of where are we, because that sounds cool, and I think everyone, we all have someone has a Fitbit or has a smartwatch or has had one. I wear an Aura ring for like sleep,
Mhm.
and I do it and I'm into it when I'm into it, but it's all personal, it's all my own behavior and my own decisions. And so I don't know, I just where's the industry in terms of, yeah, I mean, mass adoption and really leveraging the technology to its fullest extent.
Yeah, it's so from a sensor technology standpoint, there's a lot of exciting advancements going on around providing those deeper insights that I mentioned before. Sleep is a good example of a really hot topic right now in terms of people in general recognizing the importance of sleep and the impact that bad sleep, particularly chronic bad sleep, can have on your health and wellness. But that's just one example. And um, what's another element here is also integrating this type of sensor technology into a variety of different devices. You mentioned the Aura Ring is a great example, and I've worn one for several years now. I love it. And but it's one of the things I love about it, and other form factors like it, is most times I forget I'm wearing it, and but yet it's still collecting all of this data about me, and sending all that data to the app, where I can interact with that data on my own time and in my own context, and at whatever level of depth I want to. And so I think more broadly from a market perspective, there are certainly early adopters and kind of the category of the worried well, if you will, who adopt this technology early on just to get more insights, more perspective on what's going on with their health and fitness. But as the sensor technology gets deployed in more devices, and particularly devices that are passively monitoring and that ideally people forget they're wearing, those insights can get fed into a user experience or a protocol of some kind that they're able to engage with at their level of interest, and in ways that are meaningful and actionable to them. And that's going to be different for you than it is for me or for anyone else. And so I think you're going to back to this whole notion of kind of personalized health and personalized medicine. This is one element or one aspect of that where you're going to start to see people seeing or establishing a personal health baseline, if you will, part of which informed by these wearable devices. But there's a bunch of other data that's important here. Certainly, medical records are important, but environmental data, things like food diaries or glucose monitors or other things that provide insights into what you're putting into your body, not just what you're doing with your body. And so I think you're going to start to see a lot more of this data and information aggregated in a way that can then surface insights that might not have been possible before, especially when you start applying a variety of different data science and machine learning techniques to these large scale data sets. You start to see different things emerge that we might not have otherwise known.
Got it. S- Trying to figure out the best way to ask the next question, which is, you know, B to C. I'm just thinking about, what do I know? Well, first of all, I also was thinking about Elon Musk's, Neuralink business, right? So it's a chip
Mhm.
in your head that then as you think something, an action gets taken.
Yeah.
How close are we, the consumer route seems like it's a barrier to something, whether it's mass adoption or mass like processing of the data or mass actionable insight on the data, because like I have to do a lot to like to first of all discover this ring, buy it, use it, keep it charged, look
Mhm.
at my app, look at what it tells me, and then interpret that. And I'm a human, and we've got this entire multi-trillion-dollar healthcare system
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Right. So help me connect those dots, right? Why is it up to everybody? Or is that one of your problems that you're facing? Like it's up to everybody to like control themselves and do their own health. And so throw away the system. Let's just use tech. Where
Mhm.
is that kind of going, and how does that sit with you in terms of how you're thinking about the future?
It is. I wouldn't say it's a barrier. It is a gap right now between the traditional healthcare system and the individuals who are now generating more data about themselves, whether they know it and they want to or not. Even just carrying around a smartphone is collecting some level of data about your health and fitness, even if it's just an indication of how much you move around on a daily basis. Um, so there is certainly a gap there, and that's a gap to be filled from both directions. I think in terms of from the consumer wearable device and even the consumer medical device side of things, there's a lot more work to be done around providing evidence and clinical research of the value that these kinds of devices and solutions provide, and the efficacy and essentially of how well they work for improving individuals' health and fitness, whether that's around a specific disease state or more general wellness application. So there's a lot more research and clinical evidence to be presented there in terms of how these devices work and how well they work across a broad spectrum of the population. And one of the, if there are any silver linings to this pandemic environment, is it has really shined a spotlight on the capabilities of these wearable devices to do things like illness detection and symptom tracking and that kind of thing that has, and not just the ability of the devices and the solutions to do that, but clinical evidence emerging around the efficacy of these solutions. So I think you're going to start to see, and there's a lot of research underway already, not just COVID related or even infection related, but more broadly, how these devices can have an impact on someone's individual state of health. From the other side of things, in terms of the traditional medical system or healthcare system, there's still quite a bit of work to be done around how you, once you even have a proven consumer medical device that's generating a ton of data, how do you get that data into a form and into a context that is meaningful to clinicians on a day-to-day basis in helping treat their patients? And the last thing those clinicians need is just more data. They need the insights generated from that data that they can take action around. And so there's one element of just getting that data to the right place in the right context and in the right form to help provide that medical record, if you will. But then also there's the element of surfacing insights from that information that can be valuable in the context of care delivery.
Yep. Is there a question as to the data itself, or just its ability to produce a diagnosis or an insight? Does that make sense? Right. So you kind of were like, are they getting enough? Or, there's testing, there's all these there's trials being going on, but like, we know sensors can detect like certain things because it's been out there and it's been proven for a long, long time. Is it about the questioning of the efficacy of an actual sensing capability or of what that might tell us? And so the trial is, does an elevated temperature and plus this condition and plus this equal illness that needs action? Where is it on the spectrum of what we're actually testing?
Yeah, I think it's both, really. In these wearable devices now can generate clinical grade data in the context of already proven medical use cases. And I'll give you an example of a lot of people talk about the Apple Watch as a good example of they put an ECG sensor in the last couple of versions of the Apple Watch, and that has very well known and proven clinical characteristics of, if you see certain things in an ECG, then that means X, Y, and Z to a clinician. And that's an FDA cleared device and capability there within the Apple Watch. And now Fitbit has what, Samsung has it, a variety of other wearable device makers have it as well. But the interesting thing is, in addition to that, the Apple is conditioning consumers to, on that use case. Let's take AFib as this example, atrial fibrillation that can be seen with arrhythmias, irregular heart patterns. They're using the continuous PPG sensor, the green blinking lights on the back of the Apple Watch and other devices, to do continuous monitoring, looking for irregular heart rate patterns, and then prompting someone, if it sees something of concern, prompting someone to take an ECG. I think that user experience of something that is continually monitoring the individual to look for signs of concern, to then prompt the individual to take a more granular reading or use a more traditional medical device to see what's going on, whether that's in your doctor's office or with a home health device or whatever it might be. And I think you'll start to see this playing out with other conditions, other use cases as well. I mentioned blood pressure earlier. That's a great example of where we can now, in a context of a wearable device, whether it's like the AirPods you're wearing or in a watch or a finger clip, we can continually monitor blood pressure and prompt someone to take a more granular reading, whether that's with a blood pressure cuff in their doctor's office or if they have one at home. to see if there's a real problem that they need to address immediately. And so that's that kind of user experience and use case. I think you're going to start to see playing out more and more in different contexts around this.
Yep. Just for context, I mean, what's you don't have to give me an exhaustive list, but what are conditions and readings? I mean, what's possible, for like average person? And first of all, not even the average person, but if there might be doctors listening to this who are like, wait, you can actually collect that in kind of a seamless way. But give us a quick, or whatever comes to mind, rundown of what's possible with sensing technology by Valencell or in the market in general.
Yeah, so uh, my purview is sort of biased towards the PPG sensors and biometric monitoring focused around blood flow characteristics, which is what these sensors do. Those green blinking lights on the back of a smartwatch are shining light into your body and measuring how much of that light is reflected back based on blood flow, at least at a very high level. And so that lends itself to conditions around things like cardiovascular disease. And there's a variety of different conditions underneath that umbrella of cardiovascular disease that these types of sensors can provide insights on. Respiratory conditions, so things like asthma and COPD in particular, hypertension, and obviously blood pressure, high blood pressure being a massive global problem. A lot of people, everybody knows high blood pressure is bad, but a lot of people don't realize over 1 billion people around the world have high blood pressure. And that comes with all kinds of different comorbidities and can accelerate issues in not just cardiovascularly, but neurologically and as it relates to your metabolic condition as well. And so then, so the respiratory state and then also hypertension is a big one. And then also, I think a big area of interest is, and you're starting to see some new and different, not just sensor technology, but new and different uses of existing sensor technology around metabolic conditions and metabolic health in things like glucose monitoring, as an example, not just around diabetes, but more broadly in terms of metabolic health, even for someone who's not diabetic, to understand how what they're eating impacts their glucose response and therefore their insulin response, which it can be a precursor to a variety of different health conditions. And so in all of these areas where you're seeing this sensor technology being applied is trying to identify these health conditions early enough where people can take evasive action of some kind to be able to get off of that path towards hypertension or diabetes or whatever it might be.
Yep. What about in the ongoing management? So say someone has hypertension, they're aware of it. Now they want to, use, wearables, or they get prescribed wearables to measure it. Is that an effective use of the technology? I mean, obviously it can give it to you, but is that going to help you track or catch, or are these things such a long-term rehabilitation process that, just the one-off checks back to your primary care doc is sufficient? Or what about that, once you do have something and you're taking steps to mitigate, how do sensors play there?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because we actually just did a consumer survey at the end of last year, end of 2020, specifically around hypertension. And it polled about 750 people with hypertension, diagnosed hypertension, and asked them how often they among other things, asked them how often they measure their blood pressure, and would they measure their blood pressure more if it could be done passively without a blood pressure cuff. And the interesting thing is about 60% of a little over 60% of those people, again, these are diagnosed people diagnosed with hypertension, only measure their blood pressure a few times a month or less, in some cases a few times a year. And then alternatively, about 75% of those people said they would measure more often or much more often if they had the ability to measure their blood pressure passively. And so that's just one one example of this, the opportunity and the gap that exists right now with existing medical devices and even home health devices that where the technology really hasn't evolved very far in decades, if not longer. I mean, the blood pressure cuff itself has been around for 100 years plus. And so you're now starting to see technologies like this that can measure things passively, starting to fill those gaps between even people who know that they should be measuring their blood pressure at least daily, if not more, starting to fill that gap between what they actually do and what's possible going forward. And that's just with regard to blood pressure. You think you can see the application of this technology in other spaces as well, being able to kind of close those gaps around the point in time measurements, like you were saying earlier, in terms of whenever you happen to go to your doctor or healthcare provider, versus being able to see this longitudinally with daily, if not hourly, measurements of these kinds of signals.
And so that's great. Those are actually great information that survey yielded. And we've talked about customer experience, UX and CX for wearables. Like, the easier it is, the easier people will adopt. And I think, maybe we're ahead of the curve, but I feel like that's occurring, right? I mean, I've got this great ring, I've got these products out there, but and anytime you can sell a replacement product, right? And we'll continue to see more innovation. What's the CX? I still come back to the adoption on the healthcare side, right? So if someone says I have hypertension, and then like I just go buy my own I find my own wearable, I buy my own wearable, I monitor it myself, I'm not really getting benefit out of the system. How are you thinking about customer experience, user experience, or value add to the actual practitioners who are in charge of managing the care of their patients? I mean, everyone should have accountability for themselves, of course, but we're investing into a system, we're investing into healthcare, and we're investing into Medicare, Medicaid. Like, how do we get adoption there? I already said that, but I feel like that's where I keep coming back to. Like, man, if people are doing it themselves, but also we have these other, the people that are in the business, quarterbacking it more, more data can't hurt. You don't have to do shit with the data. You can just see it, right? It didn't hurt, but and it's available. The future's here. But will we embrace it? Sort of. I think that's going to be the title, by the way. But that's what I'm hearing. So how do we get a kind of a user experience or a value add to the folks that are going to be on the front lines, consuming this and making proactive recommendations, or making kind of the human layer on top of the data, aka the physician or the physician assistant or the healthcare professional?
Yeah, so there's a few things there that jump to mind, and this is obviously a really complex problem, right? Of getting this information to the right place in the right time in the right context where it's valuable. But the first thing that jumps to mind is there's a trust factor here that there needs to be more work done from the wearable side of things to prove out the efficacy, like I mentioned before, because you put this information in front of a clinician, and if they use that information for a diagnosis or a medical decision, then they are liable for the results of that decision, and they're hesitant to use data in the context of patient treatment that they don't absolutely trust. So there's a trust gap there that's got to get filled, both from the wearable side of things, but also, frankly, on the clinician side of things. And I come from a family of clinicians, so I speak from personal experience in that there's hesitancy to adopt new technologies that aren't fully vetted and well established in the marketplace. So there's some work to do there on that front as well, in terms of accepting new technologies and new ways of doing things to be able to provide better care for their patients. Yep. And so there's opportunities there on both sides, and I don't want to underestimate the import or undervalue or understate the importance of the data flows and how this fits into the patient workflow, because most of these clinicians are overworked and have very minimal time to spend with a patient and on patient data to begin with. And so we've got to make it as easy as possible and as seamless as possible to surface that data and surface those insights from these connected health devices, and get that into the patient workflow in a way that's valuable for the clinician in addition to valuable for the patient.
Yep. That's great. I feel like you know, the defensibility against AI is that, our brains are these massive advanced AI machines, so like I feel like sometimes like, oh man, the machines can do it way better. Like our brain processes a ton of stuff very fast. It's a really fast computer. And so I do appreciate the, kind of the last mile processing by an expert, by a human expert. And this isn't something that should just, one error or bug in the system and someone's doing something wrong and totally wrecks their health. So, but it's also funny because I think about kind of it's not the inverse of that, but I think of Instagram. And when it came out, there was already Twitter, there's already Facebook, and they had native mobile apps, and you could post pictures on it. And Instagram, and I can't remember, there's an article, but it was really looking into like, man, they created so much value because it was picture first. Yeah. And you could do filters. It's like, wow, I'm leading with pictures, and it's more of an emotional connection. And I'm gonna sound, well, whatever, but like, so basically, great, you iterated and innovative on like a picture sharing interface. In some context, if you zoom way out, that's a very small step for mankind, right? So it's like, oh shit, my picture sharing app is easier for me to see that vibe right away. I don't have to like scroll on the tweet. I can't remember how Twitter was exactly. It was like, I don't have to hit the tweet and then like kind of push it up and see the tweet blocking the picture. And like, I think their upload interface was better. And like, they were talking about how like, look, but when you've got billions of people using a social media app frequently, and you can make a small improvement, then like you get mass adoption, and that created billions and billions of dollars of market cap value. Well, not market cap, but they got acquired, but of value in the company. And it's like a huge story. It's part of big tech. I started by Facebook, but whatever. And we did all that, like, and man, that's like, you move that, like that wireframe, took this text out and put this picture a little bigger, and you added overlay. So I'm saying all that to say, think of all the like the hangups, right? Maybe can we get on the same page about how we can do less, right? So now this data is just like, there's flags, right? If certain little rules happen, someone then intervenes, and like, and I'm sure people are thinking about this, but kind of, I'm getting at what's the opportunity? The opportunity seems like, can we make it so that this is not diagnosing stuff? This isn't replacing a doctor. This is complementing and this is assisting, and no data is bad data, So like, how do we just do maybe a much lower level, maybe a much more simple thing? You've got all these advanced systems and advanced sensors. You're detecting blood pressure, you're detecting, CVD and hypertension, are like, I don't even know what's the third biggest killer. I think those are like the top two by, 8 miles. So it's like, great, I can assist with this. And then we're sort of arguing over like how technically efficient and like how micro are the sensors, the form factor, when can we just step back and be like, this is nothing but good stuff. How do we have maybe a minor, or it's the blood cuff, right? So I'm not going to walk around wearing a cuff, so can I just do something and make it incrementally better than what's out there now? What are your thoughts on kind of that idea of, you've got like exponential technology enhancements to what exists now, but we're arguing about it. Should we back up and try to think about an incremental enhancement that might be just easier and mass adopted? Or you've surely thought about that, but weigh in.
Yeah. And I can't remember who said it, but I can't take credit for it, but I can't give them credit either. But it's this notion of we are moving from, in terms of healthcare delivery broadly, we're moving from this perspective of low frequency, high acuity to high frequency, lower acuity. So low frequency, high acuity is you go to your doctor once a year, maybe twice a year, and there's the highest quality medical equipment in your doctor's office to be able to see at that point in time exactly what's going on in your body. But that is very low frequency, and it is just a snapshot in time. Moving that towards becoming much higher frequency, yes, it may not be as high acuity as let's say an MRI scan in your doctor's office, but can still provide some valuable insights. Again, looking at that longitudinal perspective of what's going on within your body, and then providing a shortcut to looking at where the clinicians need to focus in terms of spending their precious time on what's going to have the biggest impact for that patient. And so, to that notion of making small changes that have a huge impact, just that notion of accepting data that comes from outside of a medical facility, that gives those clinicians a longitudinal view of that patient that may not be as high acuity as, let's say, an ECG reading from a 12 lead ECG that hospitals use, but still can provide some valuable insights there. And the point made earlier about how we surface those insights in the context of the patient workflow is critical, particularly with the ubiquity of EMR, electronic medical records now. Most of those, most clinicians will tell you that those are set up to optimize billing, not necessarily optimize patient care and care delivery. And so, but you are starting to see some changes there, incremental changes, but see some changes in how that data is accessed on a per patient or on a clinician basis, on a per visit basis, and bringing in additional data from the outside, if you will, in giving that more holistic perspective of what's going on with that patient. I give you one example. We talked about CES earlier. Last week at CES, Omron, the big blood pressure cuff company, yep, announced an integration platform that integrates their remote blood pressure cuff readings directly into the electronic health record systems. And so that's just one example of what seems like a relatively small step on the surface, but just getting that blood pressure cuff data into those electronic health records is a big step forward, and I think a good example of one of the incremental changes that's starting to happen in terms of getting that more holistic view of a patient over the long term, not just at each clinic visit.
Yep. And so what do you think, how are you looking at kind of the future, starting, I mean, you could discuss the industry or Valencell, depending on, what you want to share or not share, but what do you see as the future opportunity for you? And then separately, I'll ask you about the opportunity for, entrepreneurs that are into healthcare, IoT, wearables, hearables, but starting with kind of how you guys see the future. Where are you seeing this going? Where are you trying to go? Where's the puck going to, and that you're skating towards, or whatever. I think I mixed up that metaphor, but yeah, you skate to where the puck's going, not to where it is, right? So where's the puck going?
Yeah. So in this, I mentioned earlier, in this broad kind of macro level trend of moving from this reactive, episodic sick care model and moving more to a proactive, continuous monitoring model. Within that, though, I think you're starting to see the early signs of what's being referred to as virtual primary care. So care delivery moving outside the four walls of the hospitals and healthcare facilities. And this is not specific to wearables, although wearables is a part of it. But the Teladoc and Livongo merger last year got a lot of attention, and for good reason. And that's, you look at where they are going in terms of moving this market to becoming that virtual primary care provider, where an individual or a patient, primarily the first interaction point is virtual, whether that's a telemedicine call or through a wearable device or through a mobile app or some other technology-driven interface. And then from there, the care delivery protocol begins, and they may eventually end up within a healthcare facility to treat a particular instance or disease. But it's completely flipped the model of the starting point is no longer you go to your doctor's office to figure out what's going on. It's more of you've got this continuous monitoring going on, and there are early indications of signs that you need to interact with healthcare delivery in some form or fashion. And that first interaction is virtual. So that's one piece of it. The other thing that I think is worth calling out here, and there's a lot of overlap here depending on which area of healthcare you look at, but there's a couple things. One is digital therapeutics and applying technology in a way that does not require necessarily either a personal intervention or pharmaceuticals or the traditional healthcare delivery. And so you're starting to see these digital therapeutics emerge quite rapidly and gaining not just market adoption, but regulatory adoption and regulatory clearance as well. A variety of different digital therapeutics now are FDA cleared and cleared in Europe as well. So that's an area that I think you're going to see enormous growth around. And in the context of that, and in some cases tangentially, but we see a convergence also going on of these what I'll refer to as consumer medical devices. So I mentioned the Apple Watch as one example of that, where the ECG technology or capability within that device is FDA cleared. And there's a variety of other examples like that, but I think you're going to start to see more and more of these consumer devices that do not require a prescription, but are regulatory cleared in some way, where consumers can go directly to the providers of these solutions, whether it's a digital therapeutic or a consumer medical device, or more broadly, one of these virtual primary care providers, and access that technology, acquire that technology themselves, use it either entirely on their own or in the context of care delivery within a digital therapeutic solution or virtual primary care solution more broadly. And so I know those are certainly areas that we're watching very closely and actively involved with. And I think you're going to start to see a lot of really exciting developments in all of those areas, and some of those areas overlapping.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's an opportunity for an explosion of innovation, and I don't even know if it's real innovation. I feel like all of the technology and the thinkers and the thinking is maybe even there, but you all of a sudden you bolt on this front end that's virtual. So you flip the model. Everyone's into convenience, time saving. We have enough super easy ass ways to just collect more data. So it's just like wearing my watch or my ring can't be worse than I'm filling out a form on a piece of paper. Like I might have smudged that form, right? So it's like, again, it's low fidelity or whatever. But otherwise I'm just smudging on this piece of paper. Now they have a tablet. Yeah, I still have to check it and hit next. Right. So like now we're going to be doing that a lot more. Maybe we have little brains. I mean, we have to have like nodes and brains to process. So it's not just giving me stuff and then someone's like, your doctor's like, I'm staring at this chart like they've now become a day trader or something, right? But like things are happening automated. So now everyone is leveled up. There's more information coming into the system. So by the time you come in, I mean, even that alone, right, just sort of takes everything to the next level of, efficiency, takes costs out of the system, improves outcomes. It catches things earlier. It keeps you, knows if you're on track, off track. These are rules-based systems that don't even, that does not, I'm not a like algorithm scientist, but it's easy. It could be, right. I mean, it's going to be, I'm dumbing it down a little bit, but I mean, it's like, this is huge. And then, you're layering on digital therapeutics. So it's just like, now we're able to deliver things and deliver certain types of treatments and things digitally. So the cost of goods sold is down, even the friction of buying and consuming. And then lastly, like you said, like kind of the consumer medical device, right? So more people are able to integrate, device type capabilities into everyday things, because A, it matters, and or B, they want the other features, and now it's just a bolt on.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like, oh, it's got an EKG. I mean, gosh, at some point, like, is it someone like needs a shock and it zaps you, like, oh, like, oh shit, like you're like,
Yeah.
I remember the first aid classes, you're like, always look around to see where the nearest, zapping machine is. You're like, that exists? And it kind of does. Like in airports, there is like a zapping machine.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to get the paddles out. Like, man, maybe your watch could just paddle. Like, just turn it over,
Yeah.
bam. Anyway, but so, that provides more kind of things and sensors in the marketplace. And then maybe more, I don't know if they'll actually have mitigation techniques built into the devices or just the readings, but still a more of a proliferation of data, like ports to gather inputs.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because it's a really interesting element of what's going on here. Is the technology exists and has existed for quite a while, and we're in this phase now of the big challenges and the big opportunities are in putting all the right pieces together to go solve big problems. Just as an example, the ability of wearable devices to detect atrial fibrillation and arrhythmia, like we talked about before, that capability has been around for at least 10 years in wearable devices, monitoring something known as heart rate variability. That's how they're doing it. And but that capability has been around for a long time. What is different now is a few things. One is the sensor technology has certainly evolved to get much closer to true clinical grade accuracy in these wearable devices. That's one. Two is the ubiquity of these devices. You look at most of the market research numbers say that there's probably somewhere around 500 million of these wearable devices in the field globally today, and that's growing by 120 million devices a year. So the ubiquity of these devices, and then the amount of data that those devices are outputting on a second by second basis in some cases is just enormous. But then the last element of it is layering on machine learning techniques and capabilities that has never been done before in the context of this biometric sensor data, certainly at that scale. And so the combination of all of those things is coming together in a really powerful way. And so it's exciting times to see a lot of this start to come together in a way that we're not talking brand new science here. We're not splitting the atom. It's putting the right pieces together in a way that that solves some of these massive problems that we're dealing with.
If you were, an entrepreneur like right now, knowing what you know, where would you see the opportunity in this space?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think about a lot, and if I was going to go start another company right now, it would be in this space of pulling together all of this patient generated data, for lack of a better term, whether it's from wearables or home health devices or environmental sensors and food diaries, and pulling all of that information together into first and foremost a dashboard, but more importantly the data that goes behind that, and start layering in some of these machine learning techniques in identifying different patterns to surface things that we haven't been able to see before in the context of a digital therapeutic of some kind. And that's I think what you're starting, you're going to see a lot more of, and there are a few examples of it here and there, but what the data collection and insight generation is really just beginning in terms of getting a lot of that data today is siloed in different spaces. Like someone, like you mentioned, someone may be wearing a Fitbit or using a Garmin device, or someone may be using a continuous glucose monitor, or but they haven't necessarily integrated all of that data in a meaningful way. I think there's a huge opportunity there to then get that data to the right place in the right context and surface those meaningful insights. And so that's something I think about a lot in terms of where the immediate opportunity is. Again, with existing technology, there's not any new science that needs to be created around that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. And I mean, we just need to make sure the recipient is ready to receive,
Yeah,
that data, right?
yeah,
And do something with it.
yeah,
So yeah, I feel like getting stuff and giving it to somebody isn't the issue. It's, are they going to take it and see value in it and act on that
yeah.
value?
Yeah, and I think that it's an excellent point around different people want to see that data or interact with that data in different ways. Some people not at all. They just want they only want to be notified if there's a problem. They never want to see the data otherwise. And there are other people like me who want to see that data every single day and see what's going on, and everything in between. So there's that is, I think, an important element of this as well, is not just collecting that data and surfacing insights, but presenting those insights in a way that's meaningful for individuals who are highly variable in terms of how they want to interact with that data and use those insights.
Yep. Cool. Well, I think that's a good kind of like wrap up of the formal area. I want to hear a little bit more that you started to tease this before I think we started, but CES, that was, fully remote. It was a good experience, okay experience, bad experience. How was it doing a major show fully remote?
Well, it's funny, just coming off the last question of entrepreneurial opportunities, there's a massive opportunity for a really seamless virtual conference platform, because I have not seen a good one out there, and now having participated as an attendee and a sponsor of, gosh, probably 5 now virtual conferences, and one big one being CES. And frankly, all the platforms are pretty terrible. And so it's really hard to facilitate meaningful interactions with people in a conference when those people don't necessarily know what they're looking for. And so the discovery element is I see as the big challenge. You can of course facilitate calls like this or interactions like this with Zoom or other video conferencing platform, but how do you it doesn't seem like anyone's really solved the discovery thing. Like
Yep.
in big conferences, one of the big values is just walking around the show floor and seeing things that you would not have otherwise seen,
Yep.
and in many cases, or run into people you don't otherwise run into. And so those things are obviously really hard to do in a virtual environment, but there's still much better ways to do it than most of the platforms I've seen.
Yeah. Well, it's like networking events. I mean,
Yeah.
there's sort of an ulterior motive, like, oh, there's going to be free food, drinks, or snacks, or a cluster of people so I can go see a lot of people at one time. Same with a conference. Like, I want to learn something, but you could have learned that on the internet. You could have learned that in 30 minutes in your house, but you want to get on a plane, you want to go someplace, you want to see industry people, you want to kind of rub elbows. And since you're there, you can discover new things. And those people pay to be discoverable because they know others are coming for the professional kind of growth and networking.
Yeah.
And I mean, posturing is not the right word, but sort of like, oh, I'm going to be at that, So anyways,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So yeah, another new opportunity.
I will say on the discovery side, I have found some of the platforms do a pretty good job of, at least as a conference sponsor or an exhibitor, they will show you everyone who is logged into the platform at any given time. So instead of say having to run into someone physically at an in-person conference, you can actually see who all is there and who you might want to interact with, and you can reach out to them. And of course, it's an opt-in type thing, but there is good discoverability I've seen at an individual level, but at a company level, it's a lot harder, and there's a lot more opportunity there.
Yep. What about at the company? I mean, how's that been going? Is everyone remote? Are you guys going into Raleigh to work, or how's?
Yeah, so we are we're it's sort of a hybrid model right now. Since, well, I guess even going back to last March, we've always fallen under the essential business definition, just because of the med device testing we do. And so technically our office has been open the whole time, but from March till about August, September timeframe last year, it was really only a handful of people going in, only the people that absolutely had to touch the hardware and either ship something out or do some physical manipulation of hardware that they don't have the equipment at home. Since then, since the September timeframe, we've opened it up to whoever wants to come into the office can, but we're probably 30 to 40% of people come in on a regular basis, maybe even less than that, maybe closer to a third. But we haven't seen a drop off in productivity at all. So
Yep.
it's mostly our data science and software teams that are working from home.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think I had the kernel of that question outside of COVID, which is, how is it working at a company that is that specializes in measuring and tracking your health? So I mean, you're in
Yeah.
shape. I know that. So is everybody in shape? Is it because you're obligated to, or is it sort of
No,
the
actually.
opposite because your desire to know and be fit sort of leads you to kind of this passion and joining a place like this?
Yeah, no, it's kind of a mixed bag of, there's some people at the company who are in really good shape and others who not so much. And, it's more of a personal preference, but I think everyone at the company shares a common passion for the kind of impact that the technology can have. And that's, whether that's a personal individual experience or something else that drives that passion. But that is a common thread of seeing how this technology is being applied in ways that really ultimately help people live longer, healthier lives. Is something that I think is important to everybody at the company.
Yeah. So do you have to run on the treadmill in order to get a job there?
No, you do not.
Okay.
Although that has been, we've pushed the envelope a little bit on that because, well, you've seen our office and the lab there, and we have shut that off to any outside participants. That was been shut off since March. So Valencell employees have been the guinea pigs since then, and so we've gotten people into the lab that have not been there, Valencell people into the lab that have not been there before as test subjects. And so we're just now starting to open that up even just a little bit, specifically around some of the blood pressure testing that we're doing on an ongoing basis.
And what about Steven? Does he fall in the in shape or out of shape category?
He likes to think he actually works out 3 or 4 times a week. So
Okay.
he's, as he will tell you, he's fighting his Cajun genes. And so
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
he's got the Red Queen effect going on, that even though he's working out consistently, he's at best just staying where he is. But that's at least avoiding as his family history and Cajun genes.
Yeah, I think I gain 2 pounds every time I go to New Orleans. So if I go there a couple times a month, it's like, dang, man, it's 4 or 5 pounds like total each time.
It's hard not to do that in New Orleans.
So that's great. But yeah, so I mean, all in all, it definitely is, in a pursuit of making a dent in the universe, and kind of the people that work there are attracted by the work that matters, which I think is important in all kind of cultures. And I mean, that's great as we move into this odd sort of hybrid, remote, fully remote, remote capable workforce, being tied into kind of an underpinning of mission is more important than ever. But anyway, I think let's wrap up, and I appreciate your time and all the work that you guys are doing at Valencell. And yeah, I look forward to, continuing the conversation and seeing, where this technology takes us and changing the world for the better. So thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. It's always great to talk to you.
Awesome. Cool.